Yes.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. We will call to order the Wednesday, July 19th meeting of the Trinidad Planning Commission, and we will begin tonight with the roll call.
Commissioner Cole.
Present.
Commissioner Hakenin.
Present.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
And Commissioner Slade.
I am present, if you can hear me, via teleconference, and I am using childcare as my just cause for missing tonight's in-person meeting.
Excellent. All right. So we have a physical quorum present in the room, so I think we're ticking all of our boxes that we're learning about. Thank you for turning that up. With having one of the commissioners present via Zoom, we will need to make sure all votes tonight are by roll call instead of affirmation. Yes. All right. Second item on the agenda: approval of the minutes from May 17th. We just have the one set of minutes.
I will point out that I forgot to include the April minutes that we couldn't approve at the June meeting. So those will be on.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second. All right. Roll call on the approval of the agenda.
Commissioner Cole.
Wait, are we on the minutes or the agenda?
Minutes?
Everything? No?
I don't know. Approve the minutes.
Move to approve, right?
Yes.
Second.
You said agenda.
Sorry, minutes. My apologies.
No problem.
Minutes.
Aye.
Commissioner Hakenin.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Slade.
Aye.
All right, there we go. Words make a difference. All right, so now moving on, approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda any commissioners would like to make? The three items that we have tonight. Approved. Second. Okay. Vote, please.
Commissioner Cole.
Aye.
Commissioner Hakenin.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Slade.
Aye.
All right, we will now move on to item number 4, items from the floor. Any members of the public wishing to speak may come to the podium, please, so we can get you on the recording and try to keep it to 3 minutes.
Diane Stockness, 493 View Avenue, Trinidad. So I'm here with a couple of concerns. My first one is back to when I was on the Planning Commission, the vegetation regulations and that walk around town that I wanted to do. And Cheryl Kelly was ready for that too, just so we could walk around and check the vegetation with what's going on, the growth. I mean, lots of things really grew with all this rain. And, you know, some are city and some are private. So the other item I have is, as commissioners, I want you to look at the footprint of the community environment. Okay, so we got the new corner people on Edwards and Ocean, and I'm not sure that the square footage for the property, which includes the property and the structure, fit that piece of land. And when they were doing their driveway, which was done ministerial. Is that right, Trevor?
Yes, it was under the amount of an.
Okay. So trucks for months out there blocking the view, all their cars, they had 6 cars parked along the bluff, along, you know, which is probably city property. So anyway, what I'm saying is it's just so out of reach for Trinidad, maybe Baker Ranch or Scenic or 5 acres, you know, would have been a better spot for all that. But, you know, they're new to the community. but I was upset about it. I did talk to Mercer Fraser and I did talk to Reese and Ruben and asked them to put cones out. I also called Anton a couple of times and asked him to get Public Works to go and watch what was going on and get the cones because it's tourist season. And lots of cars, lots of trailers, and then coming around that corner can get pretty dangerous. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up for you to, just watch what's going on, and then with these ADUs, who knows what's going to go on. So as commissioners, just need to get out and walk around, please. And then call the city or, check the general plan and the regulations so that we don't get overburdened with, construction people or new people moving in.
Thanks, Diane. Anybody online with items from the floor? We are. Not seeing any hands raised or anybody unmuting. Then we shall.
I'd like to.
Yeah, please.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment as a member of the public. I would just like to make a couple of comments on the new gate that's at the top of the Groth Trail. I won't get into the issue of whether or not it was permitted or not. That's not up to me. And I completely understand if the owners of the property down the road, down Groth Lane, felt that it was important to have a gate. That is also their prerogative. My concern is that as long as that at the head of Groth Lane is part of the trail system, it is now very intimidating for anyone who might want to use that trail. The sign on the gate says private property. I understand that, but there is an easement on that Groth Lane for the trail. And there is no signs that would suggest that there is a trail there at all. And so if one were to, and also in addition to the sign, there are some stakes in the ground, which one could argue block the trail. So I guess my feeling is, again, I'm not criticizing owners for what they're doing, but if that is to be still a trailhead, I certainly think that we should do whatever we can to make it a little more inviting for people and a little more accessible as opposed to what it is right now.
Thank you. Anybody else? Last call. All right, moving on then from public comment. From the floor onto item 5, agenda items. First item being item number 1, Davies 2023-06. Just before we have a staff report, I did want to apologize to the applicant about our learning at the last meeting when we're learning some things about the change of the COVID rules, and it unfairly impacted you, and it should not have. So at least personally for me, I'd like to offer an apology for that. It delays your project, and I'm sure that doesn't feel good, and I would imagine many others have the same sentiment. Secondarily to that, there is a potential recusal issue in that I just want to speak to before the staff report begins. I do own real property within the 500-foot boundary of it. I am not planning to recuse myself. I'm planning to participate in the decision tonight. And a couple points and reasons for that. One, I have no direct financial interest in the affected parcel. I've been in contact with the city attorney. He does not believe there's a unique or disproportionate effect on the development potential or use of my real property. And furthermore, if there was that concern, there are exceptions that can be made for things that affect greater than 15% of the real property in the city of Trinidad. And we're a pretty small town. Within 500 feet, you easily exceed that threshold. So I feel like there's no conflict that's unique to me compared to anybody else. So I will be participating. And with that, staff report, please, Trevor.
Thank you. So Let me point out, thank you, Erin, for pointing out that the zoning is wrong on the cover page. The analysis of the zoning consistency is the UR zone. So the project is in the UR. So this project is located off Ocean Avenue. It's an approximately 8,200 square foot lot with an existing 2-bedroom single story residence. It's got a detached 864 square foot garage. It includes both a garage and a storage area at this time. Parking spots off the alley. Fairly flat lot, and it's got a 2-bedroom septic system. Referrals were sent out for this project. No significant concerns. DEH, Division of Environmental Health staff, did discuss the second kitchen in relation to the septic system, and they don't have any additional requirements as long as it's just a second unit. And although this project isn't proposing any changes in the height or footprint of the structure, it is increasing the amount of living space to more than of the 2,000 square foot guideline, includes some other external changes. So that does require planning commission approval, as well as under the planning commission's policies on detached living space as well. So those were adopted in April. By April 2018, because this isn't an uncommon request, utilize existing accessory structures as additional living space. And the city has allowed that in the past, but there have been issues with some of those spaces being going to dwelling units or used as second dwelling units. And so in 2018, the Planning Commission adopted these policies. The proposed project is consistent with those policies. It's a little bit different. Normally what we see is, a full bathroom, but not a kitchen. This one has the full kitchen, but not a full bathroom, which is allowed under the policy. And the applicant has stated their reasons for wanting a second kitchen. It's not the first similar request we've gotten like this. So the project is consistent with the zoning. It's not changing any of the structural footprints. The 2 parking spots outside the garage will remain. The portion that is the 2-car garage now is what's going to be converted into living space, and what is now the storage room will be converted into a 1-car garage. And there's some changes to the doors, moving the garage door on the 2-car garage and adding one on the north side, adding some windows and changing some doors around. The residence, it will bring the square footage of the residence up by 528 square feet. So that's 2,282 square feet, which is above the 2,000 square foot guideline design criteria. But again, it's not changing the whole or size of the existing structures. And it's not changing the footprint. Footprint is slightly above the guideline of 25%. The Planning Commission uses as well, but again, it's not changing physically, just convert space. But one thing, with the half bath, the proposed half bath is 5 by 10, which would make it easy to, put in a tub or a shower in the future. So as a safeguard, staff has proposed that the bathroom be limited to 5 by 5. I discussed this with the building official who had some concerns about the full kitchen. And he agreed that would prevent it from just adding a shower, bathroom. And then there's some other sort of standard restrictions that are under the policy, the detached living space policy, in terms of a deed restriction limiting the structure to 2 bedrooms and 1 unit. just requiring that it not be used or rented separately from the primary dwelling. No separate mailing addresses or utility meters. And the applicant to agree to periodic inspections will through the building inspector to ensure that these conditions are still met. The project doesn't affect views, and it doesn't affect parking, stormwater, any of those issues, so it can be found to be consistent with the LCP. The design review and view protection findings are written in a manner to allow approval. As already noted, the external changes are pretty minor. Staff recommendation is for approval of the project as conditioned in the staff report. You do have options to add or remove conditions of approval, or delay action or continue the hearing to obtain more information, or request changes from the applicant, or you can deny the project if you feel that more finding.
Questions from the commissioners on the staff reports?
Yes, so with regarding the deed restriction that was put in place from the previous remodel, maybe the applicant has more information as to like what the planning commission at that time thought was as to why they want them in that veterans in perpetuity.
That's pretty standard. It limits what the deed and the city's been doing that actually since it's actually before my time, so before 2000, doing that to protect septic systems. So the wording is actually that the number of bedrooms or units can't be increased without city approval of a new septic.
Gotcha.
So that can be removed if the septic system is
Upgraded. Gotcha.
And so that was required as part of an addition, and it was a 2005, but we don't have any evidence that ever got recorded. If the applicant has, a copy of the recorded deed, that would suffice. Otherwise,
I have a couple of questions for clarification. Uh, 17 of the packet, 5 of page 10, staff report, the 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth paragraph down, the last couple of sentences there read, this site is already connected to services and utilities, and these will not change. New or altered connections for water and sewer may be needed for the new living space. That's my understanding that based on the conditions, that there will be no additional connections for utilities.
no additional connections to the street, but they may need a water line, to the new bathroom from the existing water line
Okay, so you're talking about on the parcel.
on the parcel itself.
Oh, okay. That was
I believe the garage already has water and sewer because there's a washer and dryer in it.
Washer and dryer exists in the house. Prior to me owning it, somebody had
Sorry, would you mind just so we can get out there? I guarantee it won't be on the recording.
the garage currently doesn't have any water or sewer hookups. Prior to my ownership of the house, there was it's in there. It's removed. Just when yeah, we get some water. Connected to the restriction. I heard you planning. Kenny was Same reason we're asked. In perpetuity, that's thought. Just thought when off. Care about the city. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Speaking of perpetuity, just a general question. The conditions that we have put on that are currently here, do they impact or do they go with the land? And specifically what I am interested in is that condition 8, which is the applicant agrees to periodic inspections and walkthroughs. In the unlikely event that Tom would like to sell the property, is that condition still there?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the idea would be that the condition would last as long as the life of the project, so that it would run with the land. Nothing is recorded about that, though. In the likelihood of the city trying to enforce that, I guess it should be disclosed to future owners. I mean, that's something the planning commission should discuss. So that wasn't necessarily clear in the detached living space policy. Certainly you wouldn't, it's probably more likely that a future owner would convert the space than the current owner.
Oh, that's what I was trying to say is I'm not worried about Tom.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned about conditions that we put on property that new owners may not have any idea exist. And I'm thinking back now, you're right. We probably should take a look at this in maybe a little bit more detail, because I know that there are conditions that we put on properties that I don't know how would we ever be able to accommodate or enforce in the future with new owners.
I think it's, it's one of those things that is, it's in the record. It was agreed to as part of the permit approval. It's still part of the permit. It would probably be difficult to verify or enforce, but I think, a violation of a condition of a permit that was issued, as consistent with the zoning ordinance would be the same as a violation of the zoning. In theory.
Okay. What do I have thinking?
I think everything I had was already here. I believe in the condition I saw that the person that will draft the language of the deed restriction is the applicant, but it will need to be approved by the city attorney before getting recorded, before the permit is issued.
Yeah, we have a standard form that we use. So I will, I basically, it's a template. I just insert the address, APN, owner names. I will send that to the applicant with instructions.
So that form, in essence, just looking on packet page 21, condition number 4, proof of this statement on the deed in a form approved by the city attorney. That's the form you're talking about. That's already been approved by the city attorney. Okay, all right. Make that easy. Condition number 5, just to use Richard's favorite word, a little nit. It looks like extension of and be independent. There's a D that got dropped off there.
Yes.
And then I see a lot of references in here to things happening before the permits are issued. Is there also a phase or accountability before the final is signed off on the property too? Is that implied? It's specifically like number 6, right? Bathroom limited to size, no tub or shower, responsibility of building inspector prior to permits being issued. Is that also verified again by the building inspector at final inspection? as much as can be? Because to me, that seems like the point when you would actually be able to see something you're trying to keep from happening versus.
Yes, but you also don't want to stamp the building plans and allow construction. So that's why it's prior to building permit being issued, because you don't want to issue a permit.
I guess
with that. I would assume that's beneficial. I mean, part of the final is to make sure that the plans were, that what was constructed was consistent with the approved plans. So that should be a given in there.
Okay. Chris has it, Steve. Okay, great. Oh, thank you, Chris. Please. Thank you, Eli.
Thank you. I'm going to leave my camera off just for bandwidth purposes. I've got 3 questions for Trevor initially, and then I've got a couple questions for the applicant as well, when the time is appropriate. But I also want to add that I couldn't hear the applicant on Zoom. Again, that could be a bandwidth issue, or maybe it's a microphone issue. So I just wanted to throw that out there. My first question for Trevor is, in the staff report, you mentioned that there would likely be modifications required to the OWTS if this were to be, an ADU or, including, or if it were to include a bathroom. So I guess my question for you, a full bathroom that is how likely would the OWTS system need to be modified if there was a 3/4 or full bathroom installed?
No, the OWTS would not have to be expanded just for a full bathroom. The restriction on the full bathroom is part of the Planning Commission's policies on detached living space. So it can't have a full kitchen and a full bathroom. And that the reason of that is to keep it from becoming a second unit. Because if 2 families are cooking, 2 separate meals, that's a higher, waste discharge requirement as opposed to just this that's intended to be an expansion of the existing residence. So I would assume that septic upgrades would be required for sure for this to be a separate living unit. In terms of having a full bathroom, no septic upgrades would be required. It's just the city's policy.
I understand. Thank you. I think you'll see in my line of questions, I share the building inspector's concern that this sort of looks like an ADU. I mean, I've got family living in San Francisco who'd probably pay $2,000 a month to live in that space as it's planned. So I'll have more questions about that in just a second, but that was my first and perhaps most pressing. My second question is maybe more appropriate for a building inspector type person, but if there's going to be a kitchen, especially if it's got gas appliances, if there's going to be some heat source in that space, and for sure, since it's going to share a wall with a garage, I'm wondering if a carbon monoxide detector is mandated in that space.
That would be a building code question, and I do not know the answer.
Okay, thank you. And then my third question is related to parking. And sorry, Tom, if this causes any discomfort, but I noticed, at least last time that I walked through the alley, that there were 2 cars parked alongside the right-of-way, perhaps encroaching on the right-of-way, and that both of the on-site parking spots were occupied, one by a truck and camper, and one by a boat or utility trailer. And I'm wondering if, it's mandated that there be 2 on-site parking spaces. And I'm curious whether the extent to which those are used should factor in our decision, because as it stands, certainly all available parking on the premises seems to be occupied.
Well, I can address that, and maybe Tom can address it, wants to address it as well. Yeah, I mean, parking is kind of an ongoing concern. And I should have the parking study out hopefully in the next month, or hopefully at the next Planning Commission meeting, a draft to review. So that'll help put things into perspective.
but the regulations are 2 parking spaces in addition to any garage spaces. So that's what the standard is in the city, and this project does meet that. Maybe the standard needs to be changed, although, the state and a lot of jurisdictions are moving towards less parking to encourage fewer cars. Doesn't necessarily work in a place like Trinidad that's a little bit isolated. So I don't necessarily agree with that. But if there's a specific reason, a specific finding that, you think this needs more parking, there is the garage space as well. That could be discussed and as a condition of approval, but as proposed, it does meet the city's parking requirements.
Okay, so as long as it meets the parking requirements, I have no further concerns about the parking.
Just so it's clear, the way this is being proposed is that there would be 1 garage parking space and the 2 existing outside parking spaces for a total of 3.
That's correct.
Okay. But nothing's changing there.
But I guess currently there's a 2-car garage.
Okay.
Yeah. But the city doesn't require garage spaces. It's just 2 spaces in addition to any garage space.
Yes.
So you don't have to have a garage.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. There.
Are you, anything else, Chris? Or was that all?
I've got some remaining questions for Tom, but nothing about the staff report.
Okay, then I'd like to invite the applicant up. Tom, do you have anything you want to talk to the commission about?
Hello, can you hear me now through the speaker?
Intermittently, the other microphones seem to work better, but
I can stand here.
that doesn't seem to be working particularly well either. Maybe it's the timbre of your voice. I'm not sure.
How about now? I can't change the tip. Sorry.
Right, fair enough. So Aaron, do I have your blessing in asking the applicant a few questions directly?
Yeah.
Sure. So I think you sort of addressed this earlier. You currently have laundry facilities in your home, right? Not in the garage. They are currently in the primary residence as of this moment.
Correct, he said.
Perfect. Thanks. So, would those be, I don't know, capped? Because I see in your plans that there's, going to be laundry facilities in the additional living space. Will your existing laundry facilities be capped or otherwise be unused going forward? Could someone translate for him? Sorry, I just can't hear him.
Most likely.
Okay, got it. Because again, I've got that concern about this being sort of ADU-like, and certainly 2 separate laundry facilities would be more ADU-like, I think. Could you chat about some of the proposed features of your new second kitchen? I guess I'm specifically asking, have you thought about whether there'll be electric or gas appliances? Will it be a single or double oven? Will it be a 32 or 36-inch oven? Would you describe the kitchen itself as being more commercial-like in appearance and function, or more apartment/residential-like in its function? Is the flour mill going out there? I'm just going to try to, address the extent to which this kitchen will support your statement that you need additional space for baking artisan loaves and canning and so on and so forth.
Cool. And so here with your question, recently retired and figure out what I would like to do with the rest of my life. Cooking, maybe a cottage business at some point. space. Design set up. House is currently is really project.
Able to hear that okay, Chris?
Not at all, but if you wouldn't mind paraphrasing in 10 seconds for me, for sure.
So no plans for commercial style stuff as far as appliances, most likely electric. Tom recently has retired and is trying to figure out the next phase of his life. In essence, what he's going to do to occupy his time. And currently the way his house is set up, in order to transition between, for lack of a better word, hobbies and activities, he has to take one down, put the other up. He's looking for a space where he can kind of leave things up and go between the different interests that he's pursuing, and also not to preclude the option of perhaps a cottage, home-based kitchen kind of a thing that, for breads and whatnot, and not have to do things in the house that you'd rather do elsewhere.
Got it. Thank you, Aaron, for summarizing Tom's comments, and thank you, Tom, for your answers.
Okay, very good summary.
I think I'm good. I just wanted to sort of do my due diligence because indeed it does again appear on paper to look an awful lot like an ADU. And the bad news is that if indeed it looks like an ADU, then it might be used as one at some point in the future. But the good news is that I think that particular space, as it's proposed, is exactly the type of ADU that Trinidad needs, right? And I don't know. I just wanted to maybe encourage you.
Recording in progress.
To think about, especially if there's going to be a cap on the number of ADUs in Trinidad, to sort of go all in on this project. And obviously, there's going to be some additional costs associated with that. But again, if you're trying to sort of not just maximize the value of your home, but also sort of maximize the payoff for all of this effort, it seems like going through the appropriate steps to make what looks like 3/4 of an ADU be a full ADU, I think would do you a favor and might do some favors for subsequent owners and perhaps the community at large. So that was my editorial comments. I'll shut up. Thanks everybody for dealing with my broadband issues, and thank you, Tom, for answering the questions.
Well, thank you for me.
He says thank you. And since you're up there, Tom, anything else you want to share with us? Or
No, not really. Do wish I had this original size of the bathroom, but I had some back stuff into the storage type area. Consider that. Supposed to cut down to 5 by 5. The question is maybe for Trevor also, if that condition still exists, I would give a new drawing for the building.
Yeah, so you would submit your building plans and that meet these conditions, and then the building inspector sends them to me. I go through it and make sure that it meets conditions. Maybe you could put in a big closet behind the bathroom for planning.
Yeah, something that could have submitted for.
You'll have to ask the building official.
Okay. Oh, that did not appear on my exterior drawing. Wall that faces the house where existing door. Right there. The light that transom.
west elevation?
Yeah, on the west side. Yeah, and there's currently a door on there. Thing already.
Yep.
Might use construction that's already. Thanks. Thanks.
With that, I'll open it up for public comment. Public comment on the project. Seeing any online? And I'm not seeing any in the room. I will bring it back to the commission. Any further questions, discussion?
I don't have any further questions. I did want to discuss some of the conditions that were posed. I think for the most part, I mean, I'm fine with the project or in favor of the project. I did have some concerns about condition 6 regarding the size of the bathroom. I guess 5x5 is not a very large bathroom. He wants a larger bathroom. And I also think if I don't have the inclination that Tom wants to turn this into an ADU, but if he wants to turn it into an ADU, like making the bathroom 5x5 is not going to stop him. He can like build space, build the 5x5 bathroom, and then knock down the wall and put it in a tub later without a permit. And so I think we should give him a larger bathroom because that's what he wants. And I think what's fair is like ensuring that there's not the plumbing in place for a tub or a shower or something like that when the inspector goes through, but I don't think we need to increase the size of the bathroom. I also wanted to talk about condition 8, but maybe we should talk about condition 5 first. If anyone else has any thoughts on that?
For 6, right?
Or excuse me, 6, yeah.
Richard, Chris, any thoughts on Commissioner's proposed change to leave the bathroom in essence as it is, which is 5x10 on the submitted plans? Is that correct, Trevor? Clear.
Yes.
5x10.
And it could be, as Tristan mentioned, maybe amended so that instead of you could take out the first sentence and then no tub or shower or plumbing, or that's what it says, and just take out the first sentence.
The first line. Okay. Any concerns about striking the first line of condition 6?
Well, again, we go back to then what needs to be put on the deed. The deed restriction, excuse me.
You could add not having a full bath in the detached space to the deed restriction.
I guess what I would like to do is well, we talked about 8. See, that's my problem. I don't know what runs with the land and what doesn't.
I would say these all run with the land, as long as the permit was implemented and is in place. As long as that space remains living space, these conditions are in effect.
Well, if that's the case, then I would be okay with modifying 6 as long as 8 remains in there as well as a condition.
Chris, any comments?
I don't have any specific comments except to say that it all seems rather unenforceable, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I echo that. I think that the greater issue is the enforceability and the accountability piece. And, when the transfer of the property happens between owners, there's I have no concept of what conditions there were with the construction of my place. Nothing was. So, that's a greater issue that shouldn't hold up this application, but it's certainly one that I would love to see us revisit just conceptually. I don't have any issue with eliminating that line on item 6 because I had a question where that 5x5 came from, but I'm fine.
It would preclude putting in even a shower, according to the building. But that the deed restriction, it's not an enforcement tool so much as it is a disclosure tool.
Right.
And so that is the purpose of the deed restriction. So you could consider adding some of these further to the deed restriction. Not that I necessarily advocate putting more things on the deed, but that's the purpose, is the disclosure. And I guess one other layer that we have now that I'm finding is, with the OWTS permitting, is that's another layer where these kind of conditions, I note them on the OWTS permits, like houses limited to 3 bedrooms, detached living, so this is also something I could, include these conditions on the, or at least the bathroom one could include on the OWTS permit. And certainly that it's 1 unit and 2 bedrooms would be on the OWTS permit. So that's another disclosure tool, because those get, certainly the realtors seem to be pretty on top of getting that information to buyers.
Okay, I don't really have anything else.
Then maybe can we discuss condition 8 regarding the periodic inspections? So that is also, to be clear, in perpetuity. I guess my understanding is that Tom has tentatively agreed to that already. But in my opinion, that seems a little overreaching in terms of the city's enforcement. And I understand that, like, enforcing a lot of these conditions is very difficult, especially moving into a new ownership. But also at the same time, like, I feel like if somebody is like determined to create an illegal or unpermitted ADU, they're probably going to make it happen one way or the other. But I guess I just look at number 8 though, in terms of periodic inspections, and I think, like, if that was my house, like, I don't really want city inspector coming to my house in 24 hours. Sure.
Incredible. So someone, if they have an issue with the owner at level, periodic, it's a week, it's a month, you know what I mean? It's seem like a thing to issue that I have with that. Like, if it was a year, the city walk, understand that. Sure. It's a word that do it.
Would the commission, I mean, I don't know how the other commissioners feel, or it sounds like, Richard, you're in favor of that condition, but I'm not sure about the others. I mean, I think one ground could be just like inspections not to exceed once per year or something like that. Might be more palatable. What are your thoughts?
Well, the philosophy for a long time in Trinidad has always been build now and beg for forgiveness. And I've been here long enough to have to back and look at multiple properties where we have had, and because it was not done per the, so I completely understand the issue of periodic is very arbitrary and capricious. And I would certainly I would modify it to say something to the extent, I'm just kind of freewheeling here, I don't know if I have the right words, but something to the effect that an inspection would only be required if necessary or something like that. Doesn't have to be periodic. But there have been some examples. But let me rephrase it. A lot of what happens in Trinidad is also complaint driven. And so if there's no complaint, typically that's probably okay. But so I think that I'm flexible in terms of bringing to something to the effect that only if necessary. Something like I said, I don't have the right words. Feel free to spitball something there.
On that topic, I'm just, referencing the planning commission policy that was adopted in 2018, which is where this came from, right? And so, I want to make sure that we're respectful of that policy and that we're not making a one-time exception change. You know what I mean? I too feel that that's a very vague and speaks to a greater issue of what is to the standard of requiring inspection, necessity, nuisance, that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering, maybe as a way through, could we condition something, applicant to agree to inspections, walkthroughs by city building inspector with 24-hour notice in accordance with the planning commission policy on detached living space standard conditions. And then as a commission, we can come back to the guiding policy and at a future. I know there's a little bit of wiggle room in the interim here, but I don't think anybody's ready to go run. I think that could get us there because I feel like the bigger issue is what rises to the standard of an inspection. I don't know if that would be a way forward.
Well, unfortunately, standard condition number 4 is exactly what's here.
But you could go back and change the policy.
Well, that's what I mean.
And that's what I'm saying, reference the policy and the condition for tonight.
Oh, I see what you're
And
saying.
then at a future meeting,
Yeah. Okay.
come back to the policy and let's get that written in a way that we feel protects both entities, right? The property
That's fine.
owner and the city.
Got it.
That's kind of what I'm suggesting.
I mean, yeah, I'd be happy to revisit the policy later, but not too much. So that, yeah, I mean, I understand. Yeah, it is in the policy, and I get that one. Exceptions here, willing.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I think, what I said earlier, to reiterate that I think we really need to have a discussion on how conditions become either deed restrictions or what, and get that clarified, because I think I understand what you're saying, Trevor, but I'm just not completely convinced that it's robust enough to serve as direction for new owners. So I maybe combine the two into one discussion.
I like the suggestion of referring to the policy and then going back and refining that policy.
So does 8 become something like applicant to agree to inspections per policy number of so-and-so? Is it as simple as that?
Yeah, I would say since we don't have our policies numbered at this point, we would just refer to Planning Commission policy on detached living space and their conditions.
Chris, any input one way or the other on that suggestion?
It seems reasonable. I have no detailed comments.
Okay. Does that work, Tristan?
That works.
Okay. So then, as I understand changes to the proposed conditions, then number 6, again, we're striking out the very first sentence. And then number 8, we're going to reword it to the effect the intent being agreed to periodic or to inspections, walkthroughs in accordance with the Planning Commission policy on detached living structures. And then
Yes.
we can cover that with future agenda items later tonight. With that, is there anybody willing to make a motion?
I move that we approve the project. All of the conditions aforementioned, and which is in the packet, include striking first sentence of condition 6 and the modifications to condition 8.
Second.
Commissioner Cole,
Aye.
Commissioner Hickman,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
All right.
Commissioner Slade.
No.
Oh, Tom, are you there?
Yes.
Did you want to vote on this or abstain?
First question, Tom, are you participating
No,
in?
no. I'm not abstaining. I'm abstaining. But thank you.
Okay, and just a clarifying question for me, Tom, are you participating in the meeting tonight or wanting to as a commissioner, or are you just as a member of the public, just for our?
I'm just listening in, and I did not get I've gone to the website. I haven't been able to get the packet. I'm way far away.
Perfect.
And so I'm just listening in, and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
All right. Okay. For the record, Tom Hopkins is present online, but is being viewed as a member of the public tonight. Okay. So, all right. That's it with agenda item number 1.
Yes, I will. I'll send you a little note with a list of the conditions and what you need to do.
To item number 2. Staff report, please.
Thank you. So this is actually a 2-part item. One is an amendment to the Planning Commission's approval of mitigation and repair work for erosion on Parker Creek Trail and Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail and along Old Home Beach. And then as well as an update based on your approval of the temporary trail closures. So two items for that. So the repair work at the base of Parker Creek Trail, and then the jute matting along the base of the bluff on Old Home Beach, as well as the barrier fences at the upper and lower ends of the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail were all installed the week before Memorial Weekend so that Parker Creek Trail could be reopened. The city was not yet ready to install the fencing along the beach that was also proposed. The Planning Commission did approve all those elements, but the approval only included one fence at the lower end of the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail. So either the fencing along the beach or the fencing at the lower end of the trail. When the fencing along the beach was installed, it did go across the base of the trail on the beach. So both fences are currently there, inconsistent with the Planning Commission's approval. The Planning Commission's action was discussed at a management team meeting the following week. The management team, as well as city staff, agreed that both fences should be placed. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is the base of the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail still could look like a trail, which then would encourage people to go over the fence along the beach so that they could access this trail that they could see, unless there was a barrier across that as well. So that was a potential concern. The other issue that came up is that the fencing on the beach has to be removed by September 30th. But the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail may not be open by then. And so it would make sense to not have to take out and reinstall this fence on the lower end. That's just more ground disturbance, more people plodding along. And then in the meantime, the public works staff did observe an instance where the upper fence had been pushed aside, and a couple of people had gone down the trail when public works staff went to inspect. It was a grandma and a child, and so probably not the people who moved the fence at the top, but still they were there at the bottom of the fence trying to decide what to do. And if that fence hadn't been there, they might have climbed down over the Jeep matting and disturbed that and caused more erosion. So another reason just to leave the trail, people would turn around and go back. I provided some photos that were taken of the site, what it looks like now with the vegetation grown in. You really can't see that fence at the lower end of the trail. So I don't think it's a visual, it's not a visual issue, which was, I think, the reason that the Planning Commission didn't want it, is just, that much more kind of visual structure and obstruction in that open space area. Staff is recommending that the same findings from the original staff report can be made, and would recommend that you approve the modification to the proposal so that both fences can remain with the condition that the fence on the beach will be removed by September 30th. Questions?
I just a numbering question before we get into detailed questions. I see this is number 2023-05A. I was just curious how that fits in with our approval, which was A, B, C, D the night of. And would this necessarily be B, which was the section specific to the AM Axel Lindgren? Or
the A is referring to, it's an amendment to.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry, that's not clear.
Now it is. Thank you. Okay. I was just curious on that. Right now, then, are there any questions from the commissioners?
I just wanted to clarify the signage. I know that there is in your photograph on page 41, the lower fence, the beach fence, I guess I'll call it. There is a sign there. Is that the sign that was for preventing people to be on the fence, or is it a S sign?
Maybe Eli can clarify, but I believe that's fence the same area closed.
My point is, I just want to make sure that we're consistent with the messaging on the signs. So there's 3 signs. I just want to make sure they all say the same thing.
Yeah, the signs would be saying the same. And as far as the TAS sign, they're bringing it over tomorrow morning. That's the plan, at 11 o'clock, to be installed at the top of the Axel Lindgren Trail.
So these are all just trail closed signs.
Right.
Okay.
I don't have any questions, but as a comment, I guess, given that the trail was where the steep scarp at the bottom of the trail was covered up with jute mat and logs and trees and such. When I've walked by there, it doesn't really look like there's a trail there anymore. So I guess the argument that like it was a trail and we didn't want people to use it doesn't have traction. However, the argument for needing the fence there as of September 30th, when the beach fence comes down,
I do get that because people sprinkle up there, they can walk right up to it. It's just a comment on that part, on the justification, I guess.
Chris, did you have anything?
I've got, I think, 3 quick comments, none of real substance. The first was just that I don't think we had really considered it in the past, but I noticed this weekend that all of this fencing is visible from the pier and sort of the far end of Launcher Beach. So I just wanted to mention really quickly that as we continue to consider fence issues, we're aware of the fact that the fence is visible from places besides Old Home Beach. That's my first comment. My second comment, perhaps the most relevant, is that I think it's fine. It looks pretty well concealed as it stands. The fence at the bottom of the trail is strung between some trees or pretty dense shrubs. So I think that it's fine. The other thing I wanted to mention, however, is that it's probably time to start thinking about removal of that fence on the beach. I was there as the fence was being installed and joked with the city employees there who were installing it about removing it, and they mentioned that it's going to be pretty hard to haul all of that fencing up the hill. So I just want to start thinking about the logistics of getting that fencing removed, maybe via barge or something. I don't know, but it's going to be tricky logistically to get that done. And like I said, I was there just as installation of the beach fence was wrapping up, and I didn't see a cultural monitor there. So I saw in the staff report a statement that a cultural monitor was present, but not for the entire duration of the installation of that beach fence. So I just wanted to mention that really quickly. Otherwise, I've got nothing else to contribute.
I made my comment.
Okay.
It was about the safety or the closure signs. I don't. One could argue whether or not this is the exact approach that we should take, but that's an editorial comment. And I think our focus at this point certainly should be what we can do to help make this a better trail. So,
I just had one question. It's not clear to me the picture. I didn't realize the beach fencing had finally been installed. Does it actually return back, Trevor, to effectively occluding access on the tail ends, if you will, the left and the right side?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I just couldn't tell that from the pictures. I ran out of time today to run down there. My other comment I don't feel is relevant anymore. So that's all I have. We'll open up to any public comments on this issue. In the room, anybody online? Seeing any? Go ahead and bring it back to the commission then.
I'll make a motion, and based on the application. Excuse me?
I was trying to find it.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Based on the application materials and information included in this staff report, and based on the public testimony, I find that the project is consistent with the city certified and other applicable regulations, and I move to adopt the information and findings to the staff report and approve the project segments as described below and as conditioned herein.
Second.
I'll second if I'm permitted.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but
What was the question?
if he can second remotely, I don't see why not. Yeah. Since we want brother. Yeah.
All right, then I'll second it.
Commissioner Cole.
Aye.
Commissioner Heikkinen.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
And Commissioner Slade.
Aye.
Before we move on, Trevor, I just wanted to clarify. So then the update you've provided then kind of at the opening, or is that going to be a separate thing now?
I was going to provide an update next.
Perfect. Okay. I just
Yeah.
wanted, all right. So then we'll pause for that update then. Thank you.
I mean, not that I have a lot to add that wasn't already in that staff report. The management team has not met since May 31st. We did discuss the planning commission's decision.
including its request to, look at temporary repairs to the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail to get it open before potentially rerouting it, because that will take more time. So that was brought up, but there has not been any additional meetings or communications since that time. The GHD report is expected to be out this month, I believe. And so that will hopefully be soon, and that will provide impetus for another management team meeting. Eli, do you have anything to add?
What exactly is this GHD report study, or what are they looking?
I believe it's looking at alternatives for rerouting the trail. So sort of it's like a feasibility report.
Eli, you had mentioned to me when I was in August last or a couple times ago, you said made it sound like there was some sort of a plan for the new trail down there or something like that. Said that I might be impressed by it. I wasn't sure if you had more details on that or something.
Oh, actually, I was talking, I believe I was mentioning about the Parker Creek Trail.
Oh, okay.
That the way that the trail now goes down, I think is a much better improvement than the way it did before.
Sure.
And I mean, the whole 4 years I've been here, it's been where it's at, the trail. But I got the impression that before that large log had fallen over there, that it probably continued where once we removed the log and had that more gentle approach. I would think that maybe that was what it was. At least that's my impression, because otherwise the way that people were accessing the beach was more steep and was also pretty muddy. So this one's a much more gradual slope. Yeah, otherwise the other thing is, as far as Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail, yeah, it's up to what GHD will propose. Steve Allen's working on that. That's called the 7th generation grant that the Juri Ancestral Society has obtained. It's the sign that's going to be up tomorrow.
Now, if the GHD study included that, like a temporary, or
I don't think it did.
You're saying temporary?
Like a more immediate temporary.
Oh, yeah. No, ideally it would be maybe what we would call like a mid-range plan. So something that, the long term, because of coastal resilience plan that we're working on separately, we'll be addressing sea level rise and coastal erosion. And there, I think it's going to require something over time. But the medium range thing would be hopefully 20 to 50 years. That's what we're hoping. The long range would be 100.
It might provide a range of alternatives that might include, shorter term steps.
I'll ask a specific question, I guess. You said that you did bring up, as we requested, the concept of a shorter-term interim solution to reopen, at least in the pre-existing footprint, with the recognition long-term. And I guess my question is, can you speak to the reaction? Was it of the body? Because it's one of these things where we've made it's of great interest, I think, to many of the commissioners, and I want to make sure that was just asked. I'm just curious, can you speak to the reaction in the room, or is it going to be agendized future? I don't know how these meetings.
Yeah, I think it was, my recollection, Eli, you can correct me or add, but it really wasn't discussed. It was mentioned more in passing, and that this would be something that the city would like to discuss in the future. And it was not discussed at that time, in the limits of time in the meeting that we had. We don't need to get into that.
Yeah, and at least the impression I've gotten, I think a lot of reliance is going to be on the GHD report, and just basically to see what they come up with. and what might be feasible. But whatever it is, at least my hope, and I'll try to push for it, is that by next May, one way or another, whether it's a short term or whatever, that somehow the trail would be open, so that in other words, after Memorial Day, just like we got Parker Creek open this year, I would feel that we should, at the latest, have it reopened by next year, whether it's a short-term improvement or a modification to the toe of the trail.
Okay, I guess I would just request that staff continues at these meetings, at every meeting, to bring up the interest of the planning commission in a temporary solution to get it open. You know, recognizing that long-term, the goal, as I understand, is to potentially realign the trail and do some significant work that will take time. With, you know, the hope of the planning commission is that there's work to be done to open it at least temporarily in the existing location, with the understanding that that's just for now, and that whatever GHD comes up with, because I believe I also just heard Trevor say that the GHD plan is not looking into a temporary short-term, what can we do to maybe reopen it next month, or, you know, that kind of a thing. So I just want to make sure this doesn't fall off, because that's an important trail to the community. And I think we've heard that loud and clear.
One comment that was made at the meeting, and some of the other management team members may not have seen the trail, but Sarah Lindgren had indicated that she was surprised of the condition of the trail, meaning like the steps, so that the steps were not in as good of a condition that she would have had hoped for. So that might be an issue. In other words, to try to improve those before it's open. That's the impression I got from how it was addressed at the meeting.
I just wanted to point out that I believe that the trail is actually no longer closed as of November.
Right, that's correct. I mean, yeah. So hopefully the GHD report will, give us some insight so that you guys can make the right decision. But yeah, that's correct.
Any public comment on or questions for the update on the work? Yes, Jackie, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to, and I know the Planning Commission does not have authority over the charrette management team, but just to bring forth the Tribal Council, Trinidad Rancheria Tribal Council's efforts to be part of that charrette management team. And that is an ongoing case that is actually moving forward. What I would request is notification of any tribe management team meetings. There should be a public open meeting for discussions. And also we should be receiving any correspondence regarding the GHD report or any other information regarding the trail. So while, this case is moving forward, I won't comment any further than that, but I think the notifications to the tribe are not happening. So anything to do with the trail or the tribe management team, the tribe Trinidad Rancheria should be notified of those actions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, then I think we're done with the agenda item number 2. All right, moving on to number 3, the ADU ordinance.
I'm sorry, Eric, may I sneak in one more comment?
Thank you.
Could we request that staff provides that GHD report in one of the upcoming updates, just so that it is readily accessible to anybody who has access to the packets?
So it's not the city's report. It's not up to the city to make that public, I don't think. So we'll have to probably get permission from the Ancestral Society to share that, I would think.
Got it.
Yeah, I'd have to check with our attorney just to be on the safe side. mean, because the city's the property owner, right?
allowing the work to be done on their property. So I would think, but yeah, let's check with city attorney.
Well, I mean, we would have to review it come November.
Ideally, yeah.
I would assume some version of it, maybe some things are redacted or something.
Okay,
But yeah.
of course, I understand that, but I mean, there will be a discussion on their proposed trail design.
I guess I'm not sure what's going to happen yet at this point.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can't imagine. Well, I mean, the bottom line is you've given or closed the trail for 6 months so that it will reopen in November, which means that ideally the report would be shared, at least part of it or whatever, with the planning commission to help you determine whether or not it should be closed any longer. So
that's worth kind of front loading the expectations with all the parties involved at your meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so I guess I have a process question then. It was my understanding this had to come back to the planning.
Well, it does if we want to keep the trail closed. Otherwise, it's just going to reopen in November. The temporary closure will expire. So the temporary closure was approved for 6 months. I forget the exact date in November, and it will expire unless the planning commission extends that.
I thought it in that same decision that it was also that any design or modifications to the trail would come back to us.
Well, they would. I mean, they would have to go through a permit process. Yeah.
Well, okay, that's. I just want to make sure we weren't voting blindly in that outer space. Okay. Got it.
All right, Chris, anything else?
Nope.
All right.
Need to derail the discussion from a
No, thank you I have to remember to turn my head to the right of the screen. Take all the help I can get. All right, so moving on to agenda item number 3. Trevor.
Take us away.
So, gosh, it seems like ancient history last time we reviewed this. So it took, so let's see. Oh yeah, 2012. But no, this most recent iteration of the ordinance, the city got some grant funding, SB2, grant funding from HCD to, develop and adopt a new ADU ordinance. We did develop one in 2020 and 2021. And then we got it to a point where we wanted to get feedback from Coastal Commission staff before going any further. So I submitted that to Coastal Commission staff. It's taken quite a bit of time to get comments from them. I think maybe 6 or 8 months for the first set of comments. And then it took me some time to respond to them. And then since December 22, I've been having monthly meetings with Coastal Commission staff to discuss LCP updates and LCP grant that we have. Mostly we've actually been discussing this ADU ordinance. So there's still a few things to work out, but with the end of the SB2 grant, I wanted to get this back to you. It's in, I think, a pretty close to final format. Coastal Commission staff has also been working with HCD staff. So HCD under the state law does have some review authority over local ADU ordinances. And so sometimes it's a little bit of a negotiation between Coastal Commission staff and HCD staff in terms of, coastal resource protections. Parking is an issue that comes up fairly often in terms of deviations from the state standards. So, it's a long ordinance. It's fairly complicated. But if you can kind of put it in this framework of, there's sort of tiers of ADUs and ADU permits depending on where you are and what your ADU entails. There are JADUs or ADUs. Basically, the state standard is that if ADUs meet these certain check boxes, you have to approve them ministerially. And that means no discretion, no public hearing, no planning commission. Under the Coastal Act, things are a little bit different because you have to have public hearings. That's the one exception in the state law to the Coastal Act, is that you don't have to have public hearings. So, so we have this, so there's a ministerial ADU permit. And then if you meet all the check boxes, and then if you want a bigger one, for example, or that doesn't meet all these standards, there's certain standards that you can deviate from and get a use permit for. So that's sort of the normal permit process. And then on top of that, we've got the coastal development permit process. So we have, in this ordinance, that sets forth provisions for a ministerial coastal development permit process. And then that meet certain check boxes again. And then we also worked on provisions for an administrative CDP process, that where I could issue a CDP, it gets reported to the planning commission and it's still appealable. But it streamlines the process a little bit. And then, or you can get a standard CDP. And some of it's going to depend, like I said, on what your ADU looks like, but a lot of it's also going to depend on where you are in the city. So I think it would be really helpful to have that visual of a map. So I'm working on that because it's really going to be, it's going to be a small area of the city that's going to be subject to ministerial. Part of that's going to be because OWTS upgrades are going to be required almost always. And so that's really where we got into a sticking point with the Coastal Commission, because I wanted to have some sort of exception or exemption for certain OWTS repairs and upgrades, and they won't even allow it for repairs, even of the same size. They're pretty strict on this. And actually, for the very first time in the city, I told someone they needed a CUP for an OWTS repair, partially because of the location. But you can get an administrative permit, but that's only outside the appealable area, which in Trinidad is very small. It's really, we tried to get them to designate Underwood as the first public road between the sea. But it's because it dead ends. It's not. So Trinity. So really the only area that's going to be not appealable is basically Hector and West, East, and then, Trinity, East, not scenic, and not up the creeks, not 100 feet from the creek. So it's going to be a pretty small area. And then there's also this, it's very nuanced. It's even stricter actually than our zoning ordinance. So the general plan says you can't put in septic systems and improvements within the unstable or questionably stable areas, or within 100 feet of those areas without a geologic report. In our zoning ordinance, you only need a geologic report if you're in an unstable or questionably stable area, not within 100 feet. But the Coastal Commission is saying for them to find this ordinance consistent with that general plan policy, we also have to. So again, that unstable and questionably stable area is most of the city. That's going to be most of the city. So anyway, because I think people are going to be concerned about the proliferation of ADUs, but I think again it's going to have to go through some process and a lot of it. So I think that'll alleviate some concerns. I think we mostly follow the state requirements except for the coastal resource protection. So the 100 feet of ESHA within 100 feet of unstable areas. Within 125 feet of the bluff is what we agreed on, because that's what they did for Mendocino County. So there's those, and within an ESHA can't block public access. So there's those. The other deviation that we're looking at is a little bit with parking. So there's a few streets in town that don't have on-street parking, like Wagner. That if people had to go park on Ocean or Edwards instead of Wagner, it could affect public access. So we're looking at that. And then really the one thing I think that might be a real issue is the new height requirements that just went into effect in 2023. It's really too bad we haven't gotten this ordinance through before that, and we would have been safe with that. But yeah, for an ADU that's attached, it can be 25 feet, regardless of how big primary unit is. That's kind of a scary thought for use Trinidad. So I'm also talking to the Coastal Commission about, can they or should they make findings about character, a visual character of the community, because that is a coastal act, does protect 8 coastal communities and public view sheds. So we're looking at that. And then again, even if we can't bring that down, it's still going to apply to only a very limited amount of area of the town. So anyway, so I intended this as sort of an introduction. We did include a cap on the number of ADUs, so that 36 is an estimated build out. So I took the lots that met the minimum lot size, assuming that you're not going to get a septic system for 2 units on anything smaller than that, and said a quarter of those. And 10% is usually a max for the number of people that want an ADU or that build an ADU. So I think that's probably an overestimate of the number that we would ever have in Trinidad. But it helps the Coastal Commission make their findings in terms of water and septic capacity. And HCD has seemed to agree with that. It's an approach that Coastal Commission has taken with other ordinances. And then it goes through the layers of permits, and then coastal resource protection standards, public health and safety requirements, that's fire sprinklers, things like that. And the septic system is there as well. And then you've got general standards that apply to both JADUs and ADUs. And then you have development standards specific to ADUs, development standards specific to junior ADUs, and then we have the permitting procedures, then the ministerial CDP procedures, and then some provisions for dealing with existing ADUs. So that's sort of an overview and outline of the ordinance. I'm happy to take comments and questions. I'll be meeting with Coastal Commission staff again next week, so I can bring your comments and questions to them as needed.
Big general questions, or do we want to go through page by page?
Questions. Okay. Thanks, Trevor, for tackling this coastal.
I had just one general question. The map you're developing, and I believe it was part of the water survey, some of that work where you
Kind of, we're just discussing future build out for water needs. The future ADU potential was accounted for in that.
That's
map, right.
That's right.
So is it possible to, on that map or on a separate map, also so we can see where are the sites you've identified as most likely, understanding it's not 100%?
Okay, so lots that meet the minimum lot
Right,
size.
just so we can get an idea where would these things be, and it would be, for me, helpful to have that on that same map that also has kind of however you're going to make this crazy color scheme thing, which is the appealable and all those types of things. Or maybe it's just be one big blob of color with a very small section where it's not. That was it for me.
All right. Anything on the page 1 of the staff report packet, page 59?
Did you ask Chris? Sorry.
Anything general, Chris, before we dive in?
We're going page by page through the staff report first. Is that correct?
Yes.
Not the ordinance itself. Okay. Then
I was going to do both. kind of,
Fair enough, but in that order. Just because I can't see it at the moment, I just wanted to ask Trevor about that 36 number, how that was settled on.
Yeah, so that was in 2018, I believe it was. We were looking, I did a build out assessment of Trinidad and the Trinidad's water service area to look at water use at future build out. And so I had to estimate, potential build out for these areas, based on zoning, certainly for primary units. For second units, it was a little tougher. Septic limitations are probably going to be the biggest limiting factor. So I only counted lots that met the minimum lot size, assuming that, you're not going to be able to get a big septic system big enough for 2 units on anything smaller than that. And then I just took a quarter of those. So it should be an overestimate. I saw 10% as sort of a maximum of the number of ADUs that are normally found in a community. So 25% should be an overestimate. And then the idea is that if we get to 36, we'll revisit that number.
Got it. Thank you. Just one more quick general comment, which I don't think will come as much of a shock, is that we're going to need a lot of public input, right? I don't know how many people are in the room. I see there's a fair number on Zoom, but while I acknowledge that this is just an introduction to the issue, boy, it'd be really nice to have the highest possible amount of community involvement and community feedback on this before it's essentially too late. So whatever avenues we have for maximizing engagement, I'd like to explore those avenues. Thanks.
that I think we're good with the staff report. Move into the proposed amendment here.
Page 1 of the amendment, anything on there?
This might be a nit, and again, I hesitate to say that I probably am repeating myself from previous discussions, but down under the new section 17.08.365 at the bottom of the page, we say joint accessory dwelling unit, or JADU, means a unit. Is unit defined elsewhere?
No, I don't think it is. I think that's a good point.
I think I know what it is.
Probably be a dwelling unit, because dwelling unit is defined.
It is defined, yeah. That would probably make more sense, yeah.
All right, anything on page 2?
Under 17.08.33377 living area. I understand the intent there. I'm a little worried though that when we say habitable, that needs to be crisped up a little bit. And typically what I think I've seen in the past is any areas which are conditioned. That means either heating or cooling of some sort, as opposed to just habitable. I mean, some people could live in some unusual circumstances. So.
And that is the intent. I believe that's from the building code.
Habitable is?
Yeah. It's certainly, this is from other ordinances, but I will look into that.
Habitability is definitely a thing. It's definitely a California state law, or it appears in California state law anyway, habitability.
Yeah, because I think there are, building code standards for what is habitable, and some, like, to condemn something, to consider it not, how things like that. Yeah, I will look into that.
Moving on to page 3.
Page 4.
Page 5. I had one. Right in the middle of the page, letter C, regarding ADU or JDO, associated new development shall not be permitted on a property with known park resources. Can that be reworded to say like cannot be permitted so that it impacts archaeological resources? I guess my thought is like, if it's on a parcel that has known archaeological resources, then you know where those archaeological resources are.
Potentially. So I think, so this is where some of this gets a little difficult to wrap your head around. Or I've had trouble with it anyway. Don't speak for anyone else. So exceptions. So this is for the ministerial. So if you can't be located on a property with archaeological resource and get ministerial approval. Because if you look at F, you can, if you are on one of those, then you just have to get a standard CDP. So that, because with the ministerial, the thing with the ministerial approval is you can't add conditions like having a cultural monitor on site. So the idea is that you go through the standard process and then you add that condition. You can have the ADU, but you have a cultural monitor.
So I also had a question with this same one, and I don't understand, where is that documented?
We don't. I mean, we don't have a map. No. I mean, we have a variety of archaeological studies that have been done around town. I know of at least one where some resources were found.
Well, there is like the
North Coast Information Center, yeah.
Like that, no one's required to ping them.
Yeah, and anything's going to be within quarter mile, or or whatever in Trinidad. So yeah, so that could be broaden known cultural resources near. We could think about rewording that. I think we're heading towards eventually. I mean, almost any project in Trinidad with soil disturbance is going to require a cultural monitor.
Yeah, it to me, I guess what I'm trying to do is to protect someone who decides that they want to do an ADU.
They don't know.
And they don't know, and that can be very expensive, difficult. Right now, I wouldn't have any idea where to go to understand what the archaeological resources would be or where. Yeah, I wouldn't have any idea. I mean, I understand your point, though, that most likely in almost all situations, we would have to have a cultural monitor, but you got for that. So, okay.
No, I think this is, I think we should probably have a discussion with the tribes on this.
Sure. Another comment here, and it's, I just happened to circle it on this page in letter E, where we say that any associated new development may not interfere. Once again, it's back to the may versus shall. And could you just reiterate, this is now the new word that takes the place of shall? Is that right, as I understand it?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a good question, and I will ask. That's a good general question for the Coastal Commission. My impression has been that they prefer may and may not. To me, shall is more definitive, but I will ask them about that because that's a good question.
I vaguely remember we had a discussion on that before, but.
Moving on to page 6.
I had a question on point number 2.
as I understand it, so the way point 2 is written right now, if somebody builds a new detached ADU structure, they will not be required to install a fire sprinkler system if the primary structure does not. So the new building would not have to meet current codes. I'm not reading that properly because I guess my
Except the
safety-
fire sprinklers, yes.
my life safety question is I would be hesitant to embrace an opportunity to install something like that that can mean the difference for somebody between life and death. And new construction is an appropriate time, I feel, to do that versus retroactively to existing construction.
That is directly from the state code, so I'm not sure we can, they must have seen that as a barrier to construction of ADUs.
With new construction, it's much easier. And there's a common misconception that they're designed to extinguish fires. No, they're designed to keep a small one in check and increase survivability profile for people to get out. Obviously, I have a vested perspective or a hefty perspective on this issue, and I've seen them make a difference both directions.
Yeah. Well, let me verify that language from the code.
Okay. Anything else on page 6?
Yeah, very quickly on item 3 there below what you were just referring to. I certainly understand that, except that I just wonder, is it necessary maybe to say something regarding that any power connections between the two buildings need to be undergrounded or in some way sealed, or I don't know exactly whether or not that's a big deal or not, but I just would hate to see somebody routing cables across between two roofs just to comply with the requirement.
Or if that's a code, maybe that's a code thing.
It might be a code thing.
That comes up later, I think, on page 7.
Undergrounding requirement.
Utilities for detached ADUs shall be installed underground if connected to the primary.
Well, yeah, I understand that.
But I guess between, like on Underwood, they're not underground, and if you did it between buildings.
Yeah,
that's what-
I don't know if it's that big of a deal, but just from an aesthetic standpoint.
No, but yeah, okay. I see what you're saying, yeah.
We'll look into that.
I had a
And I
question.
wonder if, well, there's a Solar Rights Act too, where people are, you can't require design review for solar panels. But we might be able to have some objective standards in terms of they can't extend above the roof peak by more than a certain height.
That's the code.
The solar.
You have to leave border all the way around the edge of your roof,
Including the peak.
Okay.
At least I was subject to it.
I do know that we had solar panels that were, because of the angle that they wanted, were raised above the roof line. Was causing issues. That was on.
That's like on a flat roof, especially. Then you could have.
Yeah, that was. Forget who it was.
I know, we didn't do design review for Dwight's, but the angle was one of the.
Well, that was
I
the
would-
view issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where does the Solar Rights Act,
Yeah,
right, supersede that, right?
yeah.
I just had a question on the last section, C, under general standards for accessory dwelling units, and just, I didn't read it enough to understand it, but the exception, you can't rent, that you may rent it separately, but may not be sold or otherwise conveyed separately, and then the exception for the primary, built by, and then it goes on. Is that a requirement that we are just bound by? It was just an interesting exception. I was just curious.
Yeah, and I specifically asked the coastal commission about that, because wouldn't that be a subdivision that then, would require a CBP? But no, it'd be like, I guess, like a townhouse or a condo where the land doesn't change hands, but the structure, you can sell the structure separate. So that is, and it's from the state. So it wouldn't divide the land, it would just be like, I don't know.
So who pays the taxes?
Yeah, interesting.
I never understood how condos work. Yeah.
I guess that'd be, I mean, they must have some agreement with the
Like,
landowner if they don't own the land. I don't know.
Didn't understand.
And it's not likely that this is ever going to come up in Trinidad.
Right, it was just,
It caught my attention.
on the page 7. There are G, utilities for detached ADUs. I just had a question. So a separate standalone ADU will require a separate meter or not necessarily?
No, detached, okay, no, separate utility meters. Well,
Because if
I
as,
guess the
as a
idea
landlord,
is-
you don't care.
yes, so the idea is you can have separate, the city can require separate meters. Let's see. Again, I think this is straight from the state code, but it's good to understand these things.
I just felt like it wasn't clear. I mean, it was very clear if it's attached, right? I
Put one in a garage, it's attached to my structure, I don't have to have it. But if I put it in an outbuilding that's large enough, then I
You
do.
have to have a meter, okay.
So that was kind
So
of
it
my
says when
question.
they're not required, but when are they required?
Right.
Again, they use the word shall.
Well, that's because the state code uses shall. The coastal resource protection code was from the Mendocino ordinance where coastal commission likes may.
One, I had a question. Prohibition of conversion of all or portion.
To, converting it back from an ADU or JDU into living space, right?
So then would this preclude somebody from ever converting it into
To a bedroom. So I build an ADU on my property and down the road, I want to offer it as a 3-bedroom. Is that not?
right? Because it was approved as an ADU and now I want to make it part of the living space of my property. Like, I'm out of the ADU.
So that is my addition, and that is because this ordinance creates a loophole from design review. So someone could, I want a 3-bedroom house. I'm just going to call it an ADU. I'm going to put in an ADU and not have to go through design review. I can block my neighbor's view, and I'm just going to convert it back to my house. The idea is that the reason you get these privileges is for that additional dwelling and affordable housing. And so if you're not going to provide that, then you don't get that loophole. Now you could convert it back with approval from the city. You could go through the design review process later and convert it back.
But I'm just thinking the property changes hands, right? Somebody sells it, a new family moves in. Oh my gosh, there's 5 bedrooms for my, extended family. This is gonna be perfect. An in-law unit, if you will.
Could be an in-law unit.
So then do I have to rent it to somebody for $1?
To
I
get-
guess
Is that another loophole? I mean,
that's, that
You don't
is,
have to rent it.
you don't even have to rent it. You're right.
Yeah.
You
But
don't
then,
even have to rent it.
I feel like that applies more to J, right, where it's like attached and then you knock a wall down later. It becomes like part of the house. Is that was sort of agreeing?
Well, no, because JADUs aren't generally any kind of structural additions. So really what I was concerned about is, again, someone saying it's an ADU to bypass the approval process, but really just using it as a residence. But you're right. I mean, there's no requirement to have an ADU. I mean, I know of one on Ocean. It's non-conforming, so it predates the zoning ordinance. There's no requirement to rent it out. So then maybe this protection doesn't.
I hear the intent. I'm just not sure it's.
Well, but if someone could come back and request, as it says, city approval.
Yeah. And I guess that is, if they want to live with it, if they come back for a building permit to knock out walls and take out the kitchen, then they're going to need the city approval. But if they feel like they can live with it with the extra doors and walls and kitchen,
That's fine.
then that's how they use it.
So that's totally usable.
I guess.
I choose to use it as a
Yeah,
bedroom for
yeah,
whoever. That's fine. Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's how it'd have to work. I don't see any other. But I'm certainly open to.
Anything else on 7? No, how about 8?
Oh, and then just one thing I'll point out, the state does allow you to say ADUs can't be STRs. I did not include that in our ordinance because I felt our cap on STRs covers that. I did require it to be owner occupied. If you're going to rent one as an STR. Like the owner has to live in one of the units if you're going to rent it as an STR.
So I had a question on that.
Yeah, me too.
And
Later.
It comes later. Okay.
Yeah.
Page 8. Anything on page 8? I had just like a comment on the off-street parking, right? So the off-street parking, and then you go down to 3A. I just pulled up, Google Maps here, and the entire city is within 1/2 mile walking distance from what I'm seeing, or virtually, not the entire, but the bulk. I mean, 1/2 mile from the bus stop across from Chevron extends down to State Beach.
It is walking distance, not as the crow flies.
Okay.
So you have to do all the.
I got you. The mapping. Okay. Sorry. That's right.
And again, it's a state standard, kind of is what it is. But we should, I mean, in terms of implementing this ordinance, we should map that.
Yeah. Okay.
And just to make sure I understand the definition of what's a car share vehicle.
Some of these state standards are not well thought through. I think they have, because I was like, I mean, with a platform like Turo, it can be anybody. It can be any car. That's a peer-to-peer. No, I think they have defined it as like a permanent spot, like a zip car lot where you.
Okay.
So the state has clarified that that's, which again is never going to occur in Trinidad, I don't think.
Yeah, not anytime soon.
Or, a historic district, it's like, well, do I leave that in there? Or Trinidad doesn't have historic districts. Well,
But if it does
that's on the
someday,
state. Maybe it will someday.
Right. Page 9.
Well, okay, I'll just, under K2, ADU shall be rented for terms of at least 30 days and shall not be used as an STR unless the primary dwelling is owner occupied. I guess I'd like to get a little bit more clarity on what that means. I mean, someone could say it's owner occupied, but could be away 6 months of the year. And their permanent residence is still that location.
That's a good point. And I believe we defined that in our STR ordinance. So we could use that language if you guys want to keep that requirement. Again, the state allows you to just say no STRs in the use, period, if you want to go that route. I didn't think that was necessary, but.
Well, I don't think that's even, that's not the case here in Trinidad.
True. For existing ADUs. Yeah, there are some.
Right.
But this would be ADUs created under this ordinance.
Okay.
Comment. I had a similar thought on that it's kind of a separate standard from what we have in place currently, and just I'm not sure that's where I want to go necessarily, to try and track which was pre, which was post. Because we have, examples where somebody owns the property that has a house in the front, they rent full time, and then in the back they have an STR that they also have a license for, they rent. It's, I don't know. It seems like we're allowing the ability maybe for an ADU someday to convert to an STR, right?
Only if they can get a permit.
if they can get a permit. So then why would we then give them a different standard that they then have to live in it when somebody else that has an STR permit doesn't have that same requirement? Just because it started out life as an ADU. I don't know. It's just,
I think that's,
Well, only if you're using this ADU ordinance to create your ADU. Right.
Yeah, I mean, you could.
I guess once
It
it's
just
created,
could-
of course, out of the barn, so to speak,
It'd
right?
be, so, a non-conforming ADU, so pre-existing non-conforming ADU wouldn't be subject to that. But it could be confusing. I mean, I don't have a problem taking that out. It was kind of a compromise between the state code. Most ordinances say no STRs. And so I thought this was kind of a compromise, but you could leave it totally open. I don't have any issue with that. I mean, I guess.
I think
Go ahead,
I think
Chris.
we certainly need some public input on that. But I could also see the argument. In fact, I'll make the argument that the purpose of the legislation is to create affordable housing, and building an ADU that you can turn into an STR does not create affordable housing.
Yes, and that's exactly why the state allows that restriction. Yeah.
So why create a double standard was the question. I mean, that's exactly why, right? The intent of the law is to create affordable housing.
Well, that's absolutely correct. I mean, and I understand that. I guess we'll just have to figure out some way that we grandfather in existing ADUs as STRs.
It's STR eligible, right?
Or STR eligible, I guess. Well, I wonder if we could say, well, that would be a little bit. Yeah, and I agree with Chris. I think public input would be very useful here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, this would be a good one to maybe highlight in the email newsletter. And put out I might have put out a notice, posted a notice when we originally reviewed it, and I'll put up another one. As well, we have to do that anyway at some point, but yeah. And apparently the city's new website is going live.
Soon.
Like Friday.
Early July, it slid. Yeah, I know. Sure.
So hopefully there's a nice way for announcements that we can easily add things like this to.
Flooded with announcements, right?
Would it be feasible to say something like any ministerially approved ADU could not be an STR?
That's one way.
I put that in the parking lot for solutions, right? For this. Back to this, right?
But once again, that's a very, very small portion of the city.
Yes. But again, that's sort of that, if you get this streamlined process, then you get that limit.
Yeah. But no, I do appreciate the intent of keeping affordable housing available, as when we lose that, it's not great for our long-term sense of community, in my opinion. Just a quick question on the ADA requirements for newly constructed first floor. What is the definition of newly constructed? Is that if somebody takes an existing building and puts an ADU within that footprint, is that newly constructed, or is that, what is that? So just kind of. Page 10.
I just wanted to clarify G2. Preparation. I think it's just a little awkward wording, but I understand, I think, what it says. But correct me if I'm right or wrong. Food preparation appliances can only be 120 volts. Is that what that says?
Yes, and I believe that's from the kitchen policy. So that's a wet bar.
Or natural propane gas, right?
No, it's that to say it can only be 120
I
volts.
think you're right.
Yes.
But it doesn't easily read that.
It doesn't easily.
Okay, yes. But yes, that is the
Because it's
intent,
first
that
thing.
it,
That's the intent, that it not be gas.
and let me see.
Okay, because my question was, so then electric 240 is out, but 100% propane would be in.
No,
No,
that's not the
okay.
intent. And let me just check the wording. That's where I got this. That doesn't. I must have gotten that from another ordinance, but,
I don't have any problem with that intent of keeping everything electric. Wait, I'm just not absolutely convinced that a prohibition on 240 is correct.
Is there any rationale to that?
Well, okay, so
To limit the ability to put a full-size oven in.
yeah, so I think the idea, and I'll have to look at the state code again, because I think the state code does not specify this. What I'm hoping is that the county should be updating, is supposed to be updating their septic regulations. And what I've talked to them a little bit about, and they've seemed open to the idea, is that a JADU would not require the same septic upgrades as for a septic unit, because of the kitchen. And because in a JADU, you're not, it's going to be more like college students who aren't going to be cooking full family meals. So you would want a smaller kitchen. So that's sort of this, that I'm hoping that JADUs are going to be something that's not going to require the septic upgrades. But I should, because I don't think that is in the state code. I think previously when the state first started including JADUs, didn't have a kitchen at all. Like you basically just put a different kind of lock on the bedroom door, and then they could have a microwave. That's your JADU. I think they've expanded a little bit.
Yeah, right now, I mean, when you think about it from a safety standpoint, the worst thing you want is a hot plate. And so that would limit you to basically a microwave or a hot plate. And what?
Air fryer.
Okay.
It's the pot.
Yes. Not to quibble, but if you have any sort of permanent stove in there, you probably want induction. And you can get the little portable ones, but and they may be the right thing, but you can't get an oven that or a cooktop. I mean an oven, I mean a cooktop.
Yeah, I mean, well,
So going back to what you were saying about the potential need or not, the need for septic upgrades with JADU potentially not being a thing anymore. I mean, I guess that fits like number one of this drain line requirements, but like the size of someone's stove doesn't necessarily correlate to their water use. That's like,
No, it's really more that food waste going down a sink is more detrimental to a septic system. And so that's why they require bigger septic systems if you've got 2 units, because you've got 2 families cooking. And so the idea is if you have a stove, you're cooking more. That doesn't necessarily mean even if you're eating out all the time that you're not washing your food guns. And it could just be, if you have the full kitchen, then you have to have the OWTS. And if you have this, you don't have to have, so we don't necessarily need to dictate that by this definition. It can just be well, I don't have to upgrade my septic system if I don't include a stove, sweet. Yeah, I don't know how that's gonna look like. Maybe, maybe that's the route to go. But you don't limit it here, but someone can choose to limit it. That was kind of the idea, is that JADUs, because when JADUs are carved out of existing habitable space, the coastal commission, and you're not adding a bedroom, the coastal commission doesn't consider that development. That would blow my mind.
In essence, you could be converting an existing bedroom into the JADU, right?
Yes,
So
that's basically.
You're not increasing the bedroom intensity.
You have to, basically, you have to convert a bedroom.
Right. So not
As
that
part of your
gain.
ADU, so you don't have a net gain.
Yeah.
The coastal commission doesn't care about kitchens. And apparently the health department doesn't either if they're not 2 units. You can still have 2 kitchens in the single family. Well, because with the babies.
Right.
I mean, if you're a cottage. Yeah, if you're cooking as a cottage industry, that's potentially no. Yeah, I don't know. But if you actually have a cottage, so there are standards for cottage industries, and canned goods is one of those things you can do, but I still think you have to have a health department. So that might.
Yeah, home kitchen, I think there's criteria
Yeah,
for that. That kind of stuff. Kind of at the end of the kitchen section, can somebody point me to where we specified what the requirements for an ADU as far as a kitchen are? Because I see them very clearly stated for the JADUs, but I cannot put my eyes on it in here.
It doesn't, I mean,
So an ADU could have no kitchen.
well, I think a dwelling unit is defined as having cooking facilities.
Okay.
Which could be a micro.
I don't know. I looked for it a couple times and I couldn't.
Yeah, I don't think there's a standard for it. Now
Okay.
you have to have a kitchen, and what is a kitchen?
Okay.
I don't know. I'll
I
look
know we spent a
into,
lot of time on the definition of a kitchen and if it's
Yeah,
a kitchen,
yeah.
I recall
Yeah.
that. It just struck me as a.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we need to define what a kitchen is. I mean, anyone who builds an ADU without a kitchen is going to struggle to find a tent, or something like that, right?
it's like if someone builds an ADU without a parking space on Wagner Street where they have to walk down the block, might have some trouble too. Oh, I'm sure they'll find someone.
But I mean,
Yeah.
the way we've defined an efficiency kitchen here under letter G, it says it includes a cooking facility with appliances. So that suggests nothing's built in, and a food preparation counter and storage cabinets. So in that context, then the 120 volts should stay the way it is.
It's built in. It's built in.
He defines it as with appliances. Well, now that I think about it, appliances
Well, appliances
could be built in. Yeah, yeah. A good one, that one.
Yeah, so that's another one to think about for all of us.
All right, page 11. If there's nothing else on 10. Well. Thirteen.
I had a comment on the illegal ADUs section regarding the 3-year grace period to get permitted. I guess like again, it's one of those things that's difficult to enforce. Do we want to include a line in there for change of ownership in that 3-year period? Like if somebody doesn't bring their illegal ADU into conformance in the first 2.5 years, sells the property, the new guy gets it.
got
6 months.
6 months to deal with it or something. I mean, maybe that's just the way it is. Just wanted to. That's something that I was thinking. Give a new guy a year or something. An extra.
Yeah,
Or maybe it's just not actually.
I mean, I think you could leave it as it is, and it's just tough luck, I guess, when they buy the place, they should disclose that that's the case. You could write in here, if the property changes hands, the new owner will have whatever period of time. Or you could write in an extension can be given in special circumstances. There's probably more.
Would it be problematic if there was some language to X amount of time after the city becomes aware of, or it be, because that would then kind of capture.
But that doesn't necessarily fix the problem of them. The city might be aware of it and then they still sell property in 2 years.
I sort of think it's already, well, the 3-year grace period is based on when the city is aware of it. Really? I don't know when else it would be based on.
I think it's from when this ordinance was adopted. So if in 5 years the city discovers your illegal ADU, just immediately get an enforcement action.
And
You know,
I guess the scenario is you buy a property, there's a tenant pre-existing, you've got no problem, they're part of the transaction, they in essence transfer through. And then down the road, 5-10 years, all of a sudden you become aware that it's illegal. Now it was never illegal, non-conforming. Now you're stuck. Is there an option for appeal, or that was kind of the one scenario that occurred to me where it would be problematic and potentially not. I don't know.
I mean, there's a lot of illegal ADUs around.
Right.
So it's like definitely going to come up.
well, I guess really, so if an illegal ADU is not registered within the time frame, then they have to get a normal after. So really all the 3-year grace period is you avoid the whole fee. Or do we?
It's a penalty, which is penalty.
So you're just avoiding the penalty fee. Is really all it does, I think.
Because if it's you're saying that then the owner shall apply for after the fact permit. So then you just go through the permitting process.
And you pay the fine.
Right.
So that's really all it is. And maybe it could be simplified. With that. This was actually in the old 2012 ordinance, and I don't know where it came from. I mean, I wrote that ordinance, but I used somebody else's ordinance, and I haven't seen anything like that in my more recent.
To refresh myself, we set the after the fact as double, correct? And that's not insignificant when it comes to the building permit for I don't know, I'm just
Construction probably. I don't know.
I guess I'm trying to imagine. So you inherit this illegal ADU, right? And you're trying to do right, but you've missed the window because you didn't know or whatever. What does that building permit fee comprise of? What it would have cost to have converted it when it was done, or how is that?
Building permit fees are based on the cost of construction.
Right. Do you calculate? You know what I mean? You see what I mean?
How do you
calculate
calculate
that? How does the building inspector determine that? Today's dollars is this amount. If we're trying to engage in compliance, and conformity, encouraging people to come into compliance. I don't know,
Yeah, I don't know how or why anyone would want to even disclose it.
right. I mean, the whole purpose, as I see building inspection, is life safety issues, right? That's really, it's not a moneymaker.
Yeah.
It's a life safety issue, in my opinion, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Something else to think about, I guess.
You said this is from the 2012,
Yeah.
so it's already in.
Well, the city adopted it, but it was never certified by the Coastal Commission. I need to look and see if the city actually rescinded the ordinance or not. It's on the city's website. But so is the the original BDU ordinance, and I know that was recently. So I should look into that one. So the city adopted it, though it wasn't certified, so it's not in effect, but the city should rescind it if it was adopted.
And while we're still trying to clarify this whole thing, paragraph B at the bottom there, I think there's just some wording issues. It says any illegal ADU that cannot meet the standards of this chapter, the certified LCP and other applicable regulations shall not be utilized as an ADU. Never mind. I think I understand that. Okay, it's just a awkward wording in my mind. Okay. Got it.
Anything else on 14?
15.
16.
Oh, the track. I saved this as a PDF instead of printing to a PDF. Printing to a PDF preserves the track changes. Saving it as a PDF does not. I didn't notice the track changes were not preserved.
Right. Okay. If that was because you had a staff report that you thought for the complexity of it. I figured that was.
Yeah, no. So for 1728.120 E is added.
2.8. What page are you on, Trevor?
Page 15.
Page 15. E is new.
E is new. In 1728.50, the plus 1 ADU and 1 JDU lot subject to requirements. So the second half of that is new.
Which one again? Just at the bottom of the page?
No, the middle maximum well, both maximum densities, it's the same.
Oh,
Plus 1.
It's the same for both, plus 1 ADU, that's added.
And just to understand the maximum density, so we could occupy their home, have a JADU, and then additionally have an ADU on the same parcel, right? Okay.
I mean, not likely in Trinidad.
But
With
conceptually,
septic
that's the max, right?
requirements, yeah.
Okay.
Now there are other provisions for multifamily dwellings that I didn't include here. I mean, I can't imagine that actually coming up, and I mean, the fourplex, the only multifamily, the triplex, the fourplex, they already don't meet septic requirements. They're not going to meet septic requirements to add. So that's something. And I guess if someone knows something. No one's brought that up. I didn't include their.
we're not trying to pasture into low income housing.
Well, I mean, we've talked about like senior housing, kind of like little senior village kind of thing, sure. So yeah, basically that's the changes is, and then for PD, in the PD zone, currently there's no principally permitted uses, so I added JDUs, a new section for principally permitted uses, so that whole section's that's on page 16, 1736 and 50, that'd be a brand new section. The density, again, I just added the 1 ADU and 1 JDU.
But can we, because we're going to see this again, right?
Yeah.
Next time with the track changes, and then just, because I'm already kind of losing track of.
Yeah.
If that works for anybody else.
That's
just,
fine.
yeah,
Sure.
okay. All right, with that, I'd like to open up to public comment on item 3, the ADU ordinance. That'll be in the room and nobody online. See any hands going up or unmuting? All right, back to us. Again, this was just kind of advisory informational, right, Trevor?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm gonna do some research on some of these questions. These were really good questions. Again, it's a complex ordinance, and you cite some things, and it's hard to think everything through. So this was really good, and I'll bring some questions to the Coastal Commission next week. And in the meantime, we're gonna work on some outreach.
All right, item 6. Oh, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got, I think, a purely theoretical question, which is that once this ordinance does eventually, become in effect, should other statutes be revisited? And I'm thinking, for example, there's not a ton of new construction planned in Trinidad, but should design review of new projects consider the potential to erect, a purely theoretical ADU, since that would have effects on overall bulk and floor to lot area ratio and views, et cetera? I guess the broader question is if a goal is to preserve coastal character of the town and we're subject to this strict ADU ordinance, can the primary residence be somehow regulated sort of in lieu of an ADU?
Yes. We will be working, we are working on a comprehensive update of everything. But yes, and it's good to look at these things not in just this ADU bubble. I do think that when we worked on the new design guidelines, the draft design guidelines, I think we had ADUs in mind. I think there's some provisions for ADUs in there. But ADUs are not subject to density or lot coverage requirements. Really, it's just septic is again the limiting factor for them. So yes, we'll be revising the design review guidelines anyway. Not too distant future, but something to think about.
And I guess just to clarify, because I was kind of rambling, my question is whether primary residences can or should be, considered when there's, I guess, if the potential for adding an ADU should be considered when permitting a primary residence. In other words, the ADU wouldn't be regulated since it is indeed, not subject to those things you just mentioned, but the primary residence is. So can the primary residence be regulated even when ADUs cannot be?
So you're suggesting, Chris, that an empty lot that someone's going to build a new building, the ADU potential of that design? Is that what you're getting at?
I think so. I don't know that it should be, but it's, I don't know to what extent like the floodgates will open once the ordinance becomes in effect. But it's, I think the theoretical, building of an ADU should be considered or could be considered when during design review of a primary residence. That's all. Just again, sorry, sort of a long and rambling thought, but there's going to be a lot of people who want to do what they can to preserve the coastal character of Trinidad, and I think that regulating primary residences might be one avenue for potentially discouraging ADUs. But it's a future discussion, I suppose.
Where though in tonight's package, there is some requirement for design review such that the ADU matches the materials, colors, etc. So, that might cover what you're referring to.
But I think, maybe Chris, are you saying like you might limit the size of a primary unit or limit where a primary unit is on the lot with the idea that they could potentially build an ADU?
Yeah, I don't know to what extent that's actually, realistic or might realistically happen, but it's worth considering, I guess, in this ongoing series of discussions.
Yeah, I think it'd be tough because ADUs could be attached or detached, so planning on what someone could do might be difficult. But
I guess my thought is like you're asking to permit a 3-bedroom house, but you permit a 4-bedroom septic system. Yeah. And then so it's like greenlit, ready to roll.
You could do that. You could do that.
Well, that happens all the time.
I don't know if it happens all the time, but That's certainly, yes, you can do that. Now though, you know, I have had inquiries, like someone, had to repair their system and it was a 3-bedroom house. They're like, well, can I do a 4-bedroom repair? And I said, no, because you have to have a coastal development permit for that.
Okay, yeah. But I was thinking of initial construction.
Initial construction where you did get the coastal development permit. Sure. You could put in a 5-bedroom system and a 3-bedroom house and say, I might want to add on in the future.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
I've seen-
Yeah.
that's the house that I used to live there on the land.
Oh, it has an oversized system.
I have a second unit now.
Does. Kind of, sort of, maybe.
Kind of, sort of, maybe. Yeah. That was the impression I got when I was for sale.
Yeah.
It's definitely the impression.
I did have one other question I found that I scratched on the cover page of this item. Does our private view shed ordinance
supersede the building height requirement for an ADU? So we protect private view sheds in the city. No.
Yeah. Because the coastal act protects public view sheds. So if we could make an argument that a public view shed would be negatively impacted, that would be a coastal act issue, but no, private views are not. And I'm curious. I mean, there are very few communities that actually protect private views, but there are a few. I'd be interested. There, you know, some of the wealthier communities, and some of those are trying to fight the state on some. But you know, they have any.
All right. Then with that, now we'll move on to commissioner reports. Anybody have any?
I will not be attending the August meeting or via Zoom or otherwise.
The only thing I'd add is that there is an upcoming water advisory committee meeting being scheduled probably about the end of July. So I'll be taking our stuff there. If anything else pops into your brain that you want me to ask, feel free to send me an email. I can do that.
Yes, I will just mention, I'm the Community Advisory Committee's Trinidad representative for RCEA. And so if anything you want to take back to RCEA as either planning commission or something like that, that's what I'm supposed to do. Just communicate about those kinds of things and take them back to RCE if required.
All right. On to the staff report then. Trevor, anything else that you haven't told us about?
No, you know, I think as I've mentioned before, my focus through August is the SB2 and LEAP grants. And then I will be transitioning to LCP grant and REAP grant. And there's a little bit of OPC grant in there as well. And I don't have any permit applications. You know, I've talked to a couple of people about some projects, but nothing's been said.
Where do we stand on progress with the general plan? Now that's a constant question.
Yes, that's a good question.
We're focused on our grant stuff, which has some impact, but I want to make sure we're not.
I mean, some of it's waiting to get through this sort of log jam of spending the SB2 and LEAP grant money. But also, well, that's, so I did just send out an email reminder about comments on the cultural resources element. So I do, and I said on there that I'm going to jump back into that as soon as these grants are done. So I hope to bring that to you in October. And then the safety element is waiting on the OPC outcomes of those OPC grant, which is behind schedule.
DC is.
So, Ocean Protection Council, that's the coastal resiliency. So they just had a public meeting on Monday. So they're gonna be, they're gonna be coming out with the vulnerability assessment this summer, and then based on the vulnerability assessment, coming up with the action plan. I at least need the vulnerability assessment to jump into the scene.
Right, any future agenda items?
Can I just, this is probably the inappropriate time. Can I ask if we're still saving the date on August 3rd for a meeting, or if that's no longer necessary?
No, that was if we weren't going to have a quorum tonight. Thank you for asking. So August 3rd was another potential date for a quorum for the Davies project.
The only future agenda item, just to put, is, you know,
Policy.
the policy, right, for
Yeah.
detached living space standard conditions. We've now referenced that and want to submit that.
Hopefully is somewhat.
Time just comes in. All right, anything else? Any public comments on future agenda items? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Yep.
Recording stop.